Hello, Deanna here, and thanks so much for being here. Today's video is going to be a book review, and the book I'm reviewing is The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is the second book in Holly Black's trilogy. The first one was The Cruel Prince, which I will leave in the cards above to go ahead and check that review out and my thoughts on the first installment of this series. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and write up a little bit of a summary on what The Wicked King is about. In this continuation from The Cruel Prince, Jude Duarte finds herself in quite the predicament. She has bound Prince Cardan to her by a sworn oath. He must do no harm to her and ensure no harm is done to her. Then she made him the High King of Faerie and acts as his seneschal. However, was this the right move to make? Especially when she learns of a potential plot involving Queen Orlgh of the Undersea's rise against the land of Faerie, and that someone is scheming to betray her. Just because the Folk of Elfhame can't lie doesn't mean that deception doesn't run amok. And Jude has found herself right in the middle while trying to balance the power of the crown and her own feelings for King Cardan. Will she be able to balance both? So much like the lovely cover depicts, I think this is so beautiful, with like it dropping into the water and the bubbles. So much like that depicts, this very much has a plot surrounding it about the tensions rising from Queen Orlgh. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and her role in the Undersea and just what that means between the land of Faerie or Elfhame and the High King and the Queen herself. So there's a lot of that plot kind of running through this as well, and Jude just trying to keep on top of it all. Definitely some juggling skills going on with Jude. So for my thoughts on this one, I enjoyed this one just as much as The Cruel Prince, if not maybe even more, as we just got to get deeper into the world of Elfhame and Jude and the people that she cares about and the people that she's up against. And we got to see a lot more of Prince Cardan as well, and his character and how she has to handle him and their relationship. So there was a lot more of that in this book installment, in the series. We also get to learn a lot more about Prince, now King Cardan, and a bit of his backstory and kind of what brought him or how it shaped him to be who he is. So that was interesting to delve into that as well. And if you watched my original series, which I should say, this disclaimer should have gone out already, is that this is going to be, spoiler alert, there's going to probably be some spoilers going on for the first book to be able to get us to this book. So if you haven't read the first book or haven't seen my video for the first, maybe go ahead and check that out, read the first book, and then definitely come back and meet me back here so that we can talk a bit more about The Wicked King. So in that video, the first video that I did for The Cruel Prince, I had made a point of saying something along the lines of that Jude's twin sister, Taryn, I didn't really get a good feel for her in the first book, and we didn't really see as much of her as I was expecting, considering that she is the twin sister of the main character. And I was wondering how much maybe that would change in the second book and we would see a lot more of the character of Taryn. And we do. We see a lot more than the first book. In this book, we see more of Taryn and just her relationship with Jude. I'm still not 100% sure on Taryn. There's still some mystery a bit almost surrounding her, or just like a bit of wondering what her motives really are and where her loyalties lie, and just there's a bit going on with Taryn. I still feel like we're gonna dive even more into it as the book continues, as the series continues, because I still feel like there's a lot of questions I have about her character and kind of her role in a lot of what happens and how her and Jude react and things like that in their relationship. So I was essentially correct in my assumptions, though, that we would see a bit more of Taryn. Who we see actually less of, or maybe about the same amount, but I just didn't feel as much of a spotlight, would be Jude's older sister Vivi, or Vivienne. We get a bit of her happenings and her little brother Oak as well, but I still feel like that almost could be fleshed out more, because I still just love the character of Vivi. I think there's a lot of faults that she has as a character, especially since she is half elfin and she is half fairy, and she kind of has a different perspective a lot than what Jude has. So some characters that were a little more predominant in the first book, we barely see, or they're almost non-existent in this one, and that's potentially either a really good thing if you didn't like some of those characters, or it's kind of sad if you did actually like some of those characters and want to see more. But there's still more to come, I'm sure, so I'm sure a lot of those beats and just different plot points going on will be wrapped up that much more in the final book. Just diving a bit more into the relationship between Carden and Jude, I really did love seeing the dynamic play out between the two of them. As I said, I loved seeing a different side to Carden and just being a bit more aware of his life story and just kind of what brought him to be who he is and how he is. But of course, Carden is very toxic in a lot of ways, especially in the first book. He had so many toxic traits. He was absolutely horrible towards Jude. So there is a bit of that just consideration to take into account, because we don't want to celebrate toxic relationships and toxic individuals and all of that. But of course, this is a fantasy story and it's just fantasy characters, and sometimes that enemies to lovers or enemies to whatever Carden and Jude become can be very intriguing and can be interesting. Just, we don't want that in our actual relationship. So, little disclaimer, don't celebrate toxic men and actually emulate them in your actual relationships. Or toxic women either. And also, I do love how Holly kind of handled this a bit, because it's not like she made Jude hopelessly in love and fall head over heels and totally overlook all of the toxicness of Cardan. So I'm sure we could all think of some books where that toxicness is celebrated or just not even really touched on at all and just overlooked because he's so wonderful and amazing, and well, he's really not. This one was, no, he's pretty, like, he did some pretty horrible stuff and he was pretty horrible individual, especially to Jude, and the fact that she might kind of like him or anything definitely has that internal struggle within her about that. And I also like that this whole story isn't just like the romance. It's not the central plot. Maybe some would argue, but to me, that wasn't my central point of this story. It was just a bit of like the B plot and not the actual central thing happening with Jude and how she was managing the courts and just trying to keep the control that she has and balance everything. I mean, the love story was just a bit of a delicious subplot, and really we're focusing more on like her political issues and the mess that she's got around her. There were a couple points. This is your typical YA female-led protagonist that is a first-person story, and so a lot of times there's that internal dialogue happening and the struggles and who do they trust and things like that. And she did fall victim to that whole keeping so much secret and inside that she has no one really to trust and no one that she shares anything with. So that does lead her down quite a few very questionable decisions and puts her in quite some unfortunate circumstances that could potentially be very deadly because she's not making sure she's trusting anyone, and yet she doesn't really have anyone to trust really. So that really played in, and we saw that a lot too. And when she finally did trust, it left a lot to be imagined. And we have to see her struggle. We see her struggle with, is she willing to trust anyone? Is there anyone that she can trust and hold in her confidence? And of course, I don't fault her for not really trusting anyone, because look at how these people treat her. They're not very wonderful. They look down their nose at her because she is human in a magical world. And so it's really hard to trust anyone. So I don't really fault her completely for trying to keep herself secure and just keep some cards in her own hands. But of course, she has to go through that struggle as well. And if maybe she had been able to trust someone, maybe some things wouldn't happen as they happened. Overall, I absolutely did enjoy this book. I gobbled it right up and I was glued to the pages and just wanted to keep figuring out more. And I'm very intrigued to see how it goes in the next installment, which is the Queen of Nothing. So I am very interested to see where Jude ends up and what kind of happens with Jude and how her story develops in the Queen of Nothing. I'm giving this one, just like I gave The Cruel Prince, the first one, I am giving this a 5 out of 5 stars because I thought it was fantastic. It's really done well. It's engaging, it's popping, it's action-packed, it's really well, just a nice balance of action and internal dialogue and just so much going on that it was a really very exciting story, and I can't wait to get my hands on the next one. So 5 stars for me. So that is it for me on this video. If you've read The Wicked King, let me know. If you read the whole series, I'd love to hear some non-spoiler thoughts below, and then hopefully I can get my hands on the 3rd book and read that soon and come back with a review for you on that one. Hopefully this just goes whoop and it's another 5-star. But that's gonna be it. I'm gonna leave you with that. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. Thank you so much for being here. Take care of yourself, and you will see me next time. Bye!